In the year 2347, humanity had stretched its reach far beyond Earth. Dozens of star systems were now home to colonies, bustling with life and industry. But space was vast, and danger lurked in every shadow. Captain Ilara Voss stood on the bridge of the Erebus, a small but sturdy scout ship assigned to patrol the edge of explored space. Her crew was tired after weeks of routine checks, but they knew better than to let their guard down. Out here, complacency could mean death. The bridge hummed with the soft whirring of instruments and the occasional beep of monitors. Lieutenant Marcus Ree, the communications officer, adjusted his headset, scanning frequencies for anything unusual. Most days, it was just static, endless waves of nothingness stretching across light years. But today was different. A faint crackle broke through the silence, followed by a voice so distorted it sounded like whispers carried on the wind. "Help us," the voice pleaded. It repeated itself over and over, each iteration more desperate than the last. "They're coming." Ilara straightened in her chair, her sharp green eyes narrowing as she turned toward Marcus. "What is that? Where's it coming from?" Marcus fiddled with the controls, trying to pinpoint the source. "It's weak, Captain. Faint signal, heavily degraded. Not human, or at least, not anymore." He hesitated, glancing up at her. Could be alien. Or something else. Ilara clenched her jaw. Humanity had encountered other intelligent species before, some friendly, others hostile. But this felt different. There was an urgency in the message that sent chills down her spine. She tapped the comm system. "Engineering, I need full power to the scanners." "Navigation, plot a course based on Marcus's coordinates." "Aye, Captain," came the reply from below decks. As the ship adjusted its trajectory, strange anomalies began to appear on their instruments. Magnetic fields fluctuated wildly, and stars seemed to shift out of place. Ensign Priya Patel, the ship's navigator, frowned at her screen. "Something's messing with our readings, Captain. These distortions, they shouldn't exist naturally." Ilara leaned forward, gripping the armrests of her chair. "Keep us steady, Ensign. We're following this signal no matter what." Hours passed, and the tension aboard the Erebus grew thicker with every passing moment. The crew exchanged uneasy glances, whispering about old legends of ships lost near uncharted regions of space. Some claimed these areas were haunted by ancient forces, remnants of civilizations long gone. Others dismissed such tales as superstition. Still, the unease lingered. Finally, the signal led them to a distant planet orbiting a dying red giant. Its surface gleamed dimly under the fading light of its sun, scarred with craters and ruins visible even from orbit. Scans revealed traces of advanced technology buried beneath layers of dust and debris. And then there was the energy signature, a faint pulse emanating from deep underground. "We found the source," Marcus said quietly, his voice tinged with awe. "Whatever, or whoever, sent that message is down there." Ilara exhaled slowly, staring at the desolate world on the main view screen. Something about it felt wrong, almost alive. Yet she couldn't ignore the plea for help. Turning to her crew, she gave the order. "Prepare a landing party. We're going down." Her words hung heavy in the air, unanswered questions lingering between them. What awaited them on that ruined planet? Would they find survivors, or something far worse? One thing was certain. Whatever happened next would change their lives forever. The landing party descended onto the planet's surface in a small shuttlecraft, its thrusters kicking up clouds of ash that swirled like ghostly specters. Captain Ilara Voss led the group, her hand resting on the hilt of her sidearm as she stepped out into the desolate landscape. The air was thin and cold, carrying an acrid smell that made her nose wrinkle. Around them stretched endless fields of rubble, broken spires jutting out of the ground like jagged teeth. "This place, it's dead," muttered Ensign Priya Patel, her voice barely audible over the howling wind. She adjusted the scanner in her hands, studying the readings. "But these ruins, they're artificial. Someone built this. Lieutenant Marcus Ree nodded grimly, his helmet lights cutting through the gloom. Whoever they were, they didn't go quietly. He gestured toward one of the larger structures nearby, a crumbling tower half buried in debris. Its walls bore scorch marks and deep gouges, as if torn apart by some unimaginable force. Ilara signaled for the team to move forward cautiously. Every step felt heavier than the last, weighed down not just by their gear, but by the oppressive silence of the planet. Even the winds seemed to whisper secrets they couldn't understand. As they approached the tower, strange symbols etched into the stone caught their attention. They glowed faintly, pulsing with an eerie light that none of their instruments could explain. Captain, called Private Leo Hayes, their security officer, pointing toward what looked like an entrance. The heavy metal doors had been blasted open, leaving behind twisted shards of alloy. Inside, the darkness swallowed everything whole. Ilara activated her wrist-mounted flashlight, leading the way into the structure. The interior was even more haunting than the outside. Shattered furniture lay scattered across the floor, and walls lined with intricate carvings told stories of a once thriving civilization. But there was no sign of life, only decay and destruction. As they ventured deeper, the atmosphere grew stranger. Shadows moved where there should have been none, flickering at the edges of their vision. The whispers from earlier returned, faint but unmistakable, echoing through the corridors. Marcus froze mid-step, gripping his rifle tightly. "Do you hear that?" "We all hear it," Ilara replied sharply, though her own unease was evident. She turned to Priya. "Any signs of survivors?" Priya shook her head, her fingers flying over her scanner. "Nothing yet. But wait." Her eyes widened as the device picked up faint biosignatures emanating from below. "There's something alive down there, beneath us." Without hesitation, Ilara ordered the team to locate a way down. After clearing away some debris, they found a narrow staircase spiraling into the depths of the building. The further they descended, the colder it became, until their breaths formed visible clouds in the dim light. Finally, they reached a large chamber filled with dormant machinery and glowing panels. And then they saw them. Huddled against the far wall were two figures, gaunt, translucent beings whose forms shimmered like heat waves. Their eyes, wide and hollow, locked onto the humans with a mixture of fear and desperation. One of them raised a trembling hand, pointing at the newcomers before collapsing weakly. "They're alive," Priya whispered, lowering her weapon. "But what are they?" Before anyone could answer, a low hum filled the room, growing louder with each passing second. Alarms blared from their suits as sensors detected movement above. Something, or someone, was coming. "We need to get out of here. Now," Ilara commanded, her voice steady despite the rising panic. She motioned for the team to grab the mysterious creatures and retreat. Whatever had destroyed this world might still be lurking nearby. And they weren't about to stick around to find out. As they hurried back toward the surface, the whispers followed them, growing louder and more insistent. It wasn't just noise. The team scrambled back toward the surface, their boots pounding against the crumbling staircase as the hum grew louder behind them. The two translucent beings, one male and one female, were carried by Private Leo Hayes and Ensign Priya Patel, who struggled under their weight despite how light they felt. The creatures' frail forms trembled with each step, their wide, hollow eyes darting around in terror. "Captain, we got company," Marcus shouted, his voice tense as he glanced over his shoulder. His scanner showed multiple signals converging on their position. Fast. Whatever was coming, it wasn't friendly. Ilara gritted her teeth, her mind racing. "Keep moving. We're not stopping until we're back on the shuttle." But it was already too late. As they burst into the open air, the sky above darkened ominously. A swarm of black, insect-like machines descended from the clouds, their metallic wings buzzing like angry hornets. Each drone was about the size of a human torso, with glowing red cores pulsating at their centers. They hovered silently for a moment before diving straight toward the group. "Incoming!" Leo yelled, Raising his rifle, he fired a burst of plasma rounds, striking one of the drones midair. It exploded in a shower of sparks, but 3 more took its place instantly. "They're endless," Priya cried, clutching the fragile alien woman closer while trying to avoid the chaos erupting around them. The ground shook as more drones landed nearby, surrounding the team in a tightening circle. Ilara barked orders, her voice cutting through the panic. "Marcus, cover our retreat. Leo, Priya, get those survivors to the shuttle now." Marcus crouched behind a chunk of rubble, firing steadily at the advancing swarm. His shots hit their mark, disabling several drones, but they kept coming, relentless and unyielding. Sparks rained down as metal clashed against metal, and the acrid smell of burning circuits filled the air. Meanwhile, Leo and Priya sprinted toward the shuttlecraft, their movements awkward due to the weight of the aliens. The creatures seemed to sense the urgency, their trembling bodies growing heavier with every passing second. One of them, the male, suddenly grabbed Priya's arm, his touch icy cold. She gasped, startled, but instead of fear, she saw something else in his eyes. Desperation. "They will come for you," he whispered hoarsely, his voice barely audible. "Do not let them take Earth." "What do you mean?" Priya asked urgently, but the alien didn't respond. Instead, he pointed weakly toward the horizon, where the red sun cast long shadows across the ruined landscape. "The shroud. It consumes all." Before Priya could ask more, a deafening roar split the air. A massive shadow loomed overhead, a larger drone, easily 10 times the size of the others, descending with menacing grace. Its body gleamed like polished obsidian, and its core pulsed with an ominous blue light. This wasn't just another machine, it was a predator. "Move!" Ilara shouted, joining the others near the shuttle. She fired her weapon wildly, creating enough distraction for Marcus to dash past the swarm and leap aboard the craft. The engines roared to life as Leo punched the controls, lifting off just as the massive drone slammed into the ground where they had been standing moments earlier. From the safety of the shuttle, the team watched as the swarm regrouped, their glowing cores flickering in unison. It was clear they weren't done. Not yet. But for now, the humans had escaped. Inside the cabin, the 2 survivors lay motionless, their shimmering forms fading slightly as if drained of energy. Ilara knelt beside them, her expression grim. "Who, or what, are you?" she asked softly. The female alien opened her mouth, her voice barely a whisper. "We are all that remains. Help us, or your world will fall next." As the shuttle soared into orbit, the weight of her words settled heavily on the crew. They had saved 2 lives, but uncovered a threat far greater than any of them could have imagined. The shuttlecraft docked with the Erebus, and the crew hurried aboard, carrying the 2 fragile survivors. Captain Ilara Voss wasted no time issuing orders. "Seal all hatches and prep for immediate departure," she commanded, her voice sharp with urgency. The memory of the swarm still lingered in their minds. The relentless drones, the ominous shadow of the larger machine, and the chilling warning from the survivors. As the ship disengaged from the planet's orbit, Ensign Priya Patel worked alongside Dr. Evelyn Carter, the ship's medic, to stabilize the translucent beings. The male alien had slipped into unconsciousness, his shimmering form flickering faintly like a dying light bulb. The female, however, remained awake, though barely. Her wide, hollow eyes darted around the medical bay, taking in every detail. "They're not human," Evelyn murmured, scanning the female with a handheld device. "Their biology, it defies everything we know. They're almost like energy given physical form." Ilara stood nearby, arms crossed as she watched the doctor work. "Can they survive?" Evelyn hesitated, glancing at the readouts on her scanner. "For now, but they're fading fast. If we don't figure out what they need, or who they are, we might lose them." Before anyone could respond, an alarm blared throughout the ship. Red lights flashed across the bridge, and Lieutenant Marcus Ree's voice crackled over the intercom. "Captain, we've got incoming." multiple contacts closing in fast. Ilara sprinted to the bridge, her heart pounding. On the main view screen, the black swarm reappeared, this time surrounding the Erebus like a living storm. Thousands of drones filled the void, their glowing cores pulsating in eerie unison. At the center of the formation loomed the massive drone that had nearly trapped them on the surface, a colossal monstrosity bristling with jagged appendages and weapons. "What do they want?" Priya asked nervously, her hands trembling over the navigation controls. "They want us dead," Ilara replied grimly. "Or worse, they want those too." She pointed toward the medical bay where the survivors lay. The swarm began firing, bolts of energy slamming into the ship's shields. Sparks erupted from consoles as systems overloaded, and the entire vessel shook violently. Marcus worked furiously to evade the attacks, weaving the Erebus through the chaos while returning fire with limited success. "Shields at 60%. Marcus shouted, sweat beading on his forehead. "We can't hold them off forever." Ilara clenched her fists, her mind racing. "Engineering. Divert all power to engines and weapons. We need speed and a way out." In the medical bay, the female alien stirred, her faint voice cutting through the cacophony. "You must flee. Leave us behind." "No," Ilara said firmly, entering the room. "We didn't come this far just to abandon you. Tell me, who are they? What is the shroud?" The alien gazed up at her, pain etched into her translucent features. "It is a force beyond comprehension. Born from ruin, it consumes worlds, feeding on life and knowledge. It will not stop until nothing remains." Her words sent chills down Ilara's spine. Before she could press further, another explosion rocked the ship, throwing everyone off balance. Alarms screamed louder as the shields dropped to 40%. "We're running out of time," Marcus called from the bridge. Ilara turned to the alien once more. "Is there a weakness? Any way to fight it?" The alien hesitated, then whispered, "Its core. Destroy its nexus. Only then can it be stopped." With that, she fell silent, her body flickering weakly. Ilara knew they couldn't stay any longer. "Marcus, plot a course back to Earth. Full burn. We're getting these survivors." And their warning to Admiral Kane. As the Erebus activated its warp drive, leaving the swarm behind in a streak of blue light, the crew breathed a collective sigh of relief. But none of them felt safe. Not yet. The shroud was real, and it was coming. And somewhere deep inside, Ilara feared they had only delayed the inevitable. The Erebus hurtled through space, its warp drive pushing it far beyond normal speeds as it raced toward Earth. Inside the cramped confines of the ship, tension hung thick in the air. Captain Ilara Voss paced the bridge, her mind replaying the events on the ruined planet. The desperate survivors, the relentless swarm, and the ominous warning about the shroud. She glanced at the view screen, where streaks of light blurred into a kaleidoscope of stars. "We'll reach Earth in 12 hours, Lieutenant Marcus re-announced, his voice steady despite the chaos they had narrowly escaped. He adjusted the controls, ensuring their trajectory remained stable. "Assuming we don't run into any more trouble." Ilara nodded but said nothing. Her thoughts were consumed by what lay ahead. Humanity wasn't ready for something like the shroud. If even half of what the survivors described was true, Earth's defenses would crumble under such an onslaught. Meanwhile, in the medical bay, Dr. Evelyn Carter continued monitoring the two translucent beings. The male alien remained unconscious, his faint glow flickering erratically. The female, however, had regained some strength, though her frail form still hovered between life and death. Evelyn leaned closer, studying her closely. "You've been through hell," Evelyn murmured softly, adjusting the settings on her scanner. "But you're holding on. Why?" The alien's hollow eyes met hers, filled with sorrow. "Because hope remains," she whispered weakly. "Hope that others will rise against the darkness." Back on the bridge, Ilara transmitted a detailed report to Earth Command, including everything they had learned from the survivors. the existence of the shroud, its insatiable hunger for destruction, and the urgent need for action. The message ended with one final plea. Prepare your fleets. This is not just our fight. It's yours too. Hours later, the Erebus arrived in orbit around Earth. As the crew prepared to disembark, Admiral Thaddeus Kane greeted them personally aboard the orbital station. A tall, grizzled man with sharp features and piercing gray eyes, Kane exuded authority. But when he saw the two translucent survivors being carried off the ship, his brow furrowed deeply. "What in God's name are those?" he demanded, turning to Ilara. "They're refugees," Ilara replied firmly. "Survivors of a world destroyed by the Shroud, a force capable of wiping out entire civilizations. Sir, if we don't act now, Earth could be next." Kane listened intently as Ilara recounted their encounter. When she finished, he stood silent for a moment, weighing the gravity of her words. Finally, he spoke. "If what you say is true, then humanity faces extinction unless we strike first. Fortunately, I've been preparing for something like this." He led them to a secure briefing room, where holographic displays lit up the walls. On one screen was an image of Earth's most advanced war fleet, the Polaris Vanguard, comprised of over 50 state-of-the-art vessels, including dreadnoughts, carriers, and fighter squadrons. The fleet represented humanity's greatest military achievement. "This is our answer," Kane said, gesturing toward the display. "Each ship is equipped with experimental weapons designed to counter unknown threats. We call it Project Aegis. But even with this firepower, we'll need strategy and courage." Ilara felt a glimmer of hope. "When do we leave?" Kane's expression hardened. "Immediately. Every second counts. I'm mobilizing the fleet as we speak. You'll join us, Captain. Your experience and these survivors could be the key to victory." As preparations began, word spread across Earth. News outlets broadcast images of the massive armada assembling in orbit, accompanied by reports of an impending alien threat. Panic rippled through cities, but so did determination. Volunteers flooded recruitment centers, eager to defend their home. Among them were scientists, engineers, and pilots, all united by a single purpose: survival. For Ilara, standing amidst the bustling activity aboard the flagship Polaris, the enormity of the mission settled over her. They were rallying humanity's best, but would it be enough? The Shroud loomed large in her mind, a shadow darker than space itself. Yet as she watched the fleet prepare for battle, she allowed herself a small measure of faith. Humanity had faced extinction before and survived. Perhaps, just perhaps, they could do it again. The Polaris Vanguard stretched across the void like a fortress of steel and light, its ships forming a vast armada, ready to face whatever horrors awaited them. Captain Ilara Voss stood on the bridge of the flagship Polaris, her eyes fixed on the swirling starfield ahead. The fleet's engines hummed with power, their experimental warp drives pushing humanity's technology to its limits. For the first time in history, Earth's mightiest warships were venturing into uncharted space, not to explore, but to fight for survival. Admiral Thaddeus Kane paced behind her, his boots clicking against the metal floor. "We've got one shot at this, Captain," he said gruffly, his voice carrying both determination and unease. "Find their nexus, destroy it, and bring our people home alive." Ilara nodded without turning around. "Understood, sir, but we're flying blind here. If those survivors can't give us more intel, we risk walking straight into a trap." Kane glanced toward the corner of the bridge, where the two translucent aliens rested under heavy guard. Their shimmering forms had grown fainter since arriving on Earth, as if their very existence was tied to the fate of their world, and perhaps all worlds. The female alien, who called herself Lyra, sat upright, her hollow eyes staring past the walls of the ship as though seeing something no one else could. "They'll talk when they're ready," Kane muttered, though doubt lingered in his tone. He turned back to Ilara. "Keep your crew sharp. We don't know what's waiting out there." As the fleet entered warp, strange anomalies began to plague their systems. Navigation consoles flickered unpredictably, and sensors picked up phantom signals that vanished as quickly as they appeared. Lieutenant Marcus Ree, now stationed aboard the Polaris, leaned over his panel, frustration etched on his face. "Something's messing with us again, Captain. Same distortions we saw near that ruined planet." Ilara clenched her jaw. "It's testing us, prodding our defenses." She tapped her comm system. "All ships, maintain formation and report any irregularities immediately. We can't afford to lose cohesion." Tensions ran high among the crew. Pilots in the fighter bays checked their crafts obsessively, while engineers worked tirelessly to reinforce shields and calibrate weapons. Rumors spread about the shroud, whispers of an unstoppable force capable of consuming entire civilizations. Some believed it was a myth. Others feared it was worse than anything they could imagine. In the medical bay, Dr. Evelyn Carter tried to coax more information from Lyra. "You said destroying the Nexus is the only way to stop it." Evelyn pressed gently. "Where is it? What does it look like?" Lyra hesitated, her voice barely audible. "Deep within, at the heart of its domain, a place of endless darkness. Only those who see beyond fear may enter." Evelyn frowned. "And if we fail?" Lyra's gaze dropped, her translucent form flickering weakly. "Then all will be lost." Hours later, the fleet dropped out of warp near the coordinates provided by the survivors. Before them lay a sprawling expanse of debris, a graveyard of shattered planets and drifting asteroids. At its center floated a massive structure, an ominous black sphere surrounded by swarms of drones. It pulsed with a deep, rhythmic glow, like a heartbeat. "This is it," Ilara said quietly, her voice tinged with awe and dread. "The Shroud's lair." The Admiral stepped forward, his expression grim. "All hands, prepare for battle. This isn't just a fight for Earth, it's a fight for every living thing. Let's show them what humanity is made of." As the fleet advanced, alarms blared throughout the ships. The swarm stirred, awakening to meet the intruders. Shadows danced at the edges of vision, and whispers echoed through the comms. They were no longer alone. The Polaris Vanguard approached the massive black sphere, its ominous glow casting an eerie light across the fleet. The moment they entered weapons range, the swarm erupted into action. Thousands of drones surged forward like a tidal wave, their glowing cores pulsating with malevolent energy. The silence of space shattered as plasma bolts and laser fire streaked through the void, lighting up the battlefield in bursts of brilliant color. "Enemy incoming," Lieutenant Marcus Ree shouted from his station on the Polaris. His fingers danced over the controls, coordinating the fleet's defensive maneuvers. "All ships, hold formation." Captain Ilara Voss gripped the railing of the bridge, her eyes locked on the view screen. "Return fire. Target their central cluster. Break their momentum." The fleet responded with devastating precision. Dreadnoughts unleashed salvos of experimental railguns, tearing through swarms of drones with explosive force. Fighter squadrons darted between larger ships, weaving through enemy formations and picking off stragglers with pinpoint accuracy. But for every drone destroyed, two more took its place. The Shroud's numbers seemed endless. On the carrier Aegis Dawn, Pilot Captain Jace Morales led a squadron of elite fighters. His craft zipped through the chaos, dodging enemy fire while lining up shots. He fired a missile that obliterated a group of drones, but not before one grazed his wing. Warning lights flashed inside his cockpit. "Morales, you've got damage," came the voice of his wingman, Lieutenant Samira Patel. "I'm fine," Jace replied tersely, banking hard to avoid another attack. "Focus on the big ones. They're coordinating the smaller drones." Back aboard the Polaris, Admiral Thaddeus Kane watched the battle unfold with a mix of pride and concern. "Engineering, how are the shields holding?" "Down to 70%, sir," replied Chief Engineer Thomas Vega. "Their weapons are unlike anything we've seen. They regenerate almost instantly." Kane clenched his fists. Divert auxiliary power to the shields. We can't afford to lose any ships here. Meanwhile, the translucent alien Lyra stood weakly in the medical bay, her shimmering form flickering as she watched the battle through a monitor. Dr. Evelyn Carter hovered nearby, monitoring her condition. "You said there was a weakness," Evelyn urged. "Is there anything else you can tell us? Anything at all?" Lyra closed her eyes, trembling. When she spoke, her voice was barely audible. Patterns. They follow patterns. Predictable movements. Strike where they converge. Evelyn relayed the information to the bridge immediately. Ilara wasted no time issuing new orders. "Marcus, analyze their movement patterns. Find the convergence points and redirect our forces there." Marcus worked quickly, feeding data into the tactical system. Within moments, he identified several key areas where the drones clustered before launching coordinated attacks. "Got it, Captain. Sending coordinates now." The fleet adjusted its strategy, focusing concentrated firepower on these convergence points. The results were dramatic. Entire clusters of drones disintegrated under sustained bombardment, creating gaps in the swarm that allowed the fleet to advance closer to the black sphere. But the shroud wasn't done yet. From the heart of the sphere emerged a colossal monstrosity, a towering construct bristling with weapons and jagged appendages. Its core pulsed with blinding intensity, dwarfing even the largest dreadnoughts. "That thing wasn't there before," Marcus exclaimed, his voice rising in alarm. Ilara stared at the behemoth, her jaw tightening. "It's adapting. Target that core, everything we got." As the fleet prepared for a final push, the cost of the battle became painfully clear. Ships exploded in fiery blasts, sending debris spiraling into the void. Pilots screamed over comms as their crafts were torn apart. Yet amidst the chaos, hope flickered. Humanity had faced impossible odds before, and this time would be no different. "Hold the line," Kane bellowed, his voice cutting through the noise. "For Earth, for every world they've destroyed." With renewed determination, the fleet pressed forward, determined to pierce the heart of the shroud, even if it meant sacrificing everything. As the colossal construct emerged from the black sphere, its sheer size and power sent shockwaves through the Polaris vanguard. Pilots scrambled to adjust their formations, while engineers worked frantically to reinforce shields and reroute power. Captain Ilara Voss stood at the center of the chaos, her mind racing as she analyzed the situation. "We can't let that thing get close to the fleet," she said sharply, gripping the railing of the bridge. "It'll tear us apart." Admiral Thaddeus Kane nodded grimly. "Focus all firepower on its core. If we can disable it, we might have a chance." The fleet unleashed everything they had: railgun salvos, plasma torpedoes, and experimental energy beams converged on the construct's glowing core. For a moment, it seemed like their efforts were paying off. The core flickered, dimming slightly under the relentless assault. But then, the construct retaliated with devastating force. A barrage of energy beams erupted from its jagged appendages, slicing through 2 dreadnoughts in an instant. Explosions lit up the void as debris scattered across space. Fighter squadrons tried to evade, but many weren't fast enough. Pilot Captain Jace Morales narrowly dodged a beam, his ship shaking violently from the shockwave. "This thing's too strong," he shouted over comms, his voice strained. "We're not gonna last much longer out here." Ilara clenched her teeth, watching the destruction unfold. She turned to Lieutenant Marcus Ree. "Marcus, I need options. Now." Marcus scanned the data streaming across his console, sweat dripping down his face. "Captain, there's something strange about its core. It's not just a weapon. It's alive. Or at least, part of it is. Look." He pulled up a holographic image showing faint neural pathways radiating from the core. Ilara's eyes widened. "It's controlling the swarm, a hive mind. That's why it adapts so quickly." Kane stepped forward, his expression hardening. "If we can infiltrate it, maybe we can disrupt its control. Send a strike team inside." Ilara hesitated for only a second before making her decision. "I'll lead the team. We'll use one of the smaller assault shuttles to breach its hull." "Are you sure?" Kane asked, concern evident in his tone. "I'm the best shot we've got," Ilara replied firmly. "Keep the fleet focused on keeping that thing distracted. We'll find a way to stop it from within." Within minutes, Ilara assembled a small strike team consisting of Marcus, Private Leo Hayes, and Dr. Evelyn Carter, who insisted on joining to gather intel about the Shroud's biology. They boarded an armored shuttlecraft and launched toward the construct, weaving through enemy fire as the fleet provided cover. The shuttle latched onto the construct's outer shell, and the team disembarked, stepping into a labyrinth of metallic corridors bathed in pulsating red light. The air was thick with static electricity, and the walls seemed to hum with life. As they moved deeper, they encountered remnants of civilizations consumed by the Shroud, shattered artifacts, fragments of alien technology, and ghostly echoes of voices long silenced. "This place, it's feeding off them," Evelyn whispered, her voice trembling. "Every world it destroys becomes part of it." Suddenly, the corridor ahead shimmered, revealing a massive chamber filled with glowing nodes connected by pulsing tendrils. At the center floated the Nexus, a pulsating mass of energy surrounded by intricate neural circuits. "That's it," Ilara said, raising her weapon. "That's the heart of the Shroud." Before they could act, the construct's defenses activated. Swarms of smaller drones poured into the chamber, their glowing cores locking onto the intruders. The team opened fire, but the drones kept coming, overwhelming them. Then Lyra's voice crackled over their comms. "You must reach the Nexus. Destroy it. I will hold them back." Ilara froze. "Lyra, how are you?" "No time," Lyra interrupted. "Trust me." Back aboard the Polaris, the translucent alien had somehow interfaced with the ship's systems, channeling her fading energy into the battle. A surge of electromagnetic pulses erupted from the fleet, disabling swarms of drones and buying the strike team precious seconds. Ilara looked at her crew, determination burning in her eyes. "Let's finish this." With renewed resolve, they fought their way toward the Nexus, each step bringing them closer to uncovering the horrifying truth and ending the Shroud's reign of terror once and for all. The strike team pushed deeper into the construct, their weapons blazing as they carved a path through waves of drones. Each step felt heavier than the last, not just from exhaustion, but from the oppressive weight of the hive mind surrounding them. The walls pulsed with energy, feeding off the destruction it had wrought across countless worlds. Captain Ilara Voss led the charge, her movements precise despite the chaos. "This thing's alive," Marcus panted, firing a burst that took down 3 drones at once. "Every node we destroy weakens it, but only for a moment." Evelyn Carter scanned the nearest node, her hands trembling as she analyzed its structure. "It's regenerating. These circuits are self-repairing." Ilara gritted her teeth, her mind racing. They couldn't keep fighting indefinitely. "Leo, set charges on those nodes. We need to create a diversion." Private Leo Hayes nodded, pulling out explosive charges from his pack. He moved quickly, planting them along key sections of the corridor while the others covered him. The explosions tore through the construct's interior, sending shockwaves rippling through its neural network. For a brief moment, the swarm faltered, giving the team a chance to advance. But the Shroud wasn't done yet. From the shadows emerged larger drones, hybrid creatures forged from metal and organic matter, their jagged forms oozing black ichor. Their glowing cores pulsed erratically, emitting low growls that resonated in the team's helmets. "These aren't like the others," Leo muttered, raising his rifle. "They're faster, smarter." One of the hybrids lunged at Evelyn, knocking her scanner from her hand. Before it could strike again, Ilara fired a concentrated plasma round straight into its core. The creature collapsed in a heap of sparking wires and charred flesh. "Stay sharp," Ilara commanded, her voice cutting through the tension. "We're running out of time." As they neared the Nexus chamber, Lyra's voice crackled over their comms once more. Her voice was weaker now, almost fading. I cannot hold them much longer. Hurry. We're close, Ilara replied, glancing back at her team. Sweat dripped down their faces, and their breaths came in ragged gasps. Yet none of them hesitated. This mission wasn't just about survival. It was about vengeance for every world destroyed, every life consumed. Finally, they'd reached the heart of the construct. The Nexus loomed before them, a pulsating orb of pure energy encased in a lattice of glowing tendrils. It radiated heat so intense it made the air shimmer. Surrounding it were clusters of smaller nodes, each humming with power. That's the control center, Evelyn said, pointing to a panel embedded in the floor below the Nexus. If we can upload a virus or overload the system. I'll do it, Marcus volunteered, stepping forward. You guys hold them off. No, Ilara said firmly. We stick together. Leo, cover Marcus while he works. Evelyn, find a way to disable those nodes. They're fueling the Nexus. The team sprang into action. While Marcus connected his data pad to the control panel, Leo unleashed a relentless barrage of fire, keeping the advancing hybrids at bay. Evelyn used her remaining tools to sabotage the nodes, severing their connections one by one. Sparks flew as circuits overloaded, causing parts of the chamber to collapse. Suddenly, a massive hybrid broke through the line, slamming into Marcus and knocking him away from the panel. Ilara reacted instantly, diving between them and firing point-blank at the creature's core. It screeched, collapsing in a shower of sparks. Marcus, are you okay? She shouted, helping him up. He nodded, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead. Almost there. Just need a few more seconds. Outside, the battle raged on. The fleet fought valiantly, but losses mounted. Ships exploded in fiery bursts, their crews lost to the void. Admiral Kane watched grimly from the Polaris, knowing the strike team's success was humanity's last hope. Back inside the construct, the final node shattered under Evelyn's efforts. The Nexus began destabilizing, its glow flickering wildly. It's working, Evelyn cried, backing away. But we have to get out of here. Now. Ilara grabbed Marcus by the arm. Let's move. As they sprinted toward the exit, the chamber imploded behind them, the Nexus collapsing in a cascade of light and energy. But their escape wouldn't be easy. The construct was dying, and taking everything around it down with it. Lyra's voice echoed faintly in their ears. Thank you for remembering us. Her words faded as the team leaped aboard their shuttle, narrowly avoiding a collapsing corridor. As they launched into space, the construct erupted in a blinding explosion, shaking the very fabric of the battlefield. For the first time in hours, silence fell over the fleet. The shroud was gone, but at what cost? The explosion of the construct lit up the void like a second sun, its shockwave rippling through space and scattering debris in every direction. The remnants of the shroud, the drones, the hybrid creatures, even the colossal sphere, were consumed in an instant, leaving behind only a field of floating wreckage. For a moment, the crew aboard the Polaris Vanguard stared at the view screen in stunned silence, their minds struggling to process what they had just witnessed. Captain Ilara Voss leaned heavily against the railing of the bridge, her body weary but her spirit unbroken. She watched as the shuttle carrying the strike team docked safely with the flagship. Relief washed over her when she saw Marcus, Leo, and Evelyn step out, battered but alive. They had done it. They had destroyed the Nexus and ended the Shroud's reign of terror. Admiral Thaddeus Kane approached her, his usual stern expression softened by pride. You did it, Captain. You saved us all. Ilara shook her head, her voice steady but tinged with sorrow. We paid a heavy price for this victory, sir. Too many ships, too many lives. Kane nodded solemnly. The fleet had been decimated during the battle. Of the 50 vessels that had set out, barely half remained operational. Pilots who had once laughed together on the carrier decks were now gone, their sacrifices etched forever into the annals of history. Yet despite the losses, there was no denying the magnitude of their triumph. Humanity had faced extinction and prevailed. Back aboard the medical bay, Dr. Evelyn Carter checked on Lyra, the translucent alien who had guided them through the chaos. But when she entered the room, she found only faint traces of energy lingering where Lyra had once stood. Her shimmering form had faded completely, her last act of self-sacrifice ensuring the team's survival. "She's gone," Evelyn whispered, bowing her head. Though she hadn't known Lyra long, the weight of her loss was profound. It was a reminder of how much others had given to protect humanity, even those who weren't human themselves. As the fleet began its journey back to Earth, the survivors gathered in quiet reflection. Pilots shared stories of fallen comrades, engineers worked tirelessly to repair damaged ships, and scientists pored over data collected from the construct's ruins. Among the debris, they discovered fragments of technology far beyond anything humanity had ever seen, proof that the shroud had indeed consumed countless civilizations. On the bridge of the Polaris, Ilara gazed at the stars streaking past the view screen. The war was over, but the scars would remain, for her, for the fleet, and for humanity itself. She thought about the worlds lost to the shroud, the voices silenced, and the warning Lyra had left behind. Hope remains. "We won," Marcus said softly, joining her at the railing. "But I can't shake the feeling. This isn't the end, is it?" Ilara met his gaze, her green eyes sharp yet filled with resolve. "No, it's not. Space is vast, and we're still learning how dangerous it can be. But today we proved something important, that we're capable of standing against the darkness. And if another threat comes, we'll face it, together." When the fleet finally returned to Earth, they were greeted as heroes. Crowds lined the streets, cheering as the battered ships descended into orbit. News outlets broadcast images of the surviving crew, hailing them as saviors of humanity. But amidst the celebrations, Ilara stood apart, her thoughts distant. Later that evening, she climbed to the top of a hill overlooking the city lights. The sky above was clear, dotted with countless stars. Somewhere out there lay mysteries yet undiscovered, and dangers yet unseen. But for now, humanity was safe. As she looked up, she whispered a silent promise to herself, and to those who had fallen along the way. "We'll never stop fighting. Not for ourselves, and not for anyone else out there who needs hope." And with that vow, she turned back toward the world below, ready to lead humanity into whatever challenges lay ahead.